I was all set to come out here and say that it's been about a year and everything is mostly dead, but after taking pictures of all these terrariums, that's actually not true. Now, most of what I've got is an elaborate collection of pond scum, but there are a couple of interesting things to note. Mostly not with these big ones, actually. So the big terrariums are cooler to look at because they're, on this kind of scale that you see. And there are some things going on in here that's interesting. It's about wintertime now, and you can see that all of this ivy is starting to turn brown and die. There's some new growth. I've already looked at the dandelions and stuff, but there's another strand of ivy that is growing up. And if you compare this to when it was planted, this lily turf grass has become absolutely huge and actually seems to be splitting off some little, pups, little cuttings that they tend to produce, and which is, if you watch the making of these, that's how I got this lily turf grass and this other one and the ones over here from this original potted plant, is that I kind of cut off the little buds that form at the bottom and plant those. But it's a good sign that things are doing well in here. Now, of course, this one's cheating a little bit because there's that crack at the bottom, and I sealed it the day I found it, but I don't think the seal is perfect, so it gets a little bit of air and ants and things in through there. But it's pretty good, and this vessel seems to have held water pretty well. I think it may be losing some. It looks like near the glass the ground is shrunk, but that could also just be that the water evaporates there and then condenses around the back of the thing. And so if you look back here, there's loads of algae, there's condensation on the glass, it's very humid on this back end of the terrarium. But on the front side, it's a bit of a desert, which is probably one of the advantages of using a bigger vessel. In fact, you can see from this view, if you kind of look broadly, this right-hand side is largely clear. You can actually kind of see through to the back side a little bit, and there's not much living in it. And then this back side is a jungle, and well, you can see my fingers a little bit through the grass, but it's mostly completely blocked up with stuff. And in the littler terrariums, you can't really get that. So I'm pleased with this, but there's nothing super unexpected about any of that. And if we look at this other little one, it's coming along. You can see a lot of these sprouts are tomato plants. I mentioned that I put the seeds in there, but those seem to be the bulk of what's growing. Looks like there's a little bit of a hackberry back there. There's some blades of grass, just this regular stuff I have around here. I don't know what it's called. And then the lily turf grass seems to have survived despite my damaging the roots. It's pretty tough stuff. And there's a little bit of clover and stuff growing up in there too. But that's not what really surprised me. Is if we come over here, this pickle jar terrarium, I'll try to do me any good for this, has developed some kind of moss or something. And you can see over here, I might throw up a close-up later. Well, you'd be watching it if I decide to do it, but it's developed some kind of moss or something out of what I thought was just scum or algae. And it might be a mix of algae and moss growing in here, or just what I thought was algae is actually a slightly more complicated moss that just hadn't gotten big enough. Most of the rest of this thing is dead, and most of these look mostly dead after about a year, but they do all have some kind of algae or something growing in them, except the front yard terrariums, which have been cooked and are pretty much completely gone. And you can still see in most of these this red stuff. My guess is it's either a red algae or some kind of anaerobic bacteria or something, because it does really well in these closed off terrariums, but I don't really see it, for instance, in the open ones over there. And then my true success story because this is a 1.0 terrarium. You can see it was planted January 9th. So it's December 4th now, so it's just shy of 11 months. Probably the next video will be the 1-year anniversary for it. And this thing, now I don't know what's going to happen when this plant eventually dies, but until then it's managed to grow that up from scratch. Not sure what it is exactly either. I don't think I put oak leaf in here. It says chervil, clover, and grass, so it would seem that I didn't. So whatever that is some local plant, and it's doing quite well for itself. And that grew up from seed in here. You can see the remains of everything that I originally planted, and that's all dead. So just shy of a year on, that's the best looking one. Most of them, the plants don't survive in these little containers, and you can see in this one sort of a similar reverse situation of what you see in the large terrarium, that there's this one little plant at the front crowding out all the light and then nothing at the back. And I think the reason for the difference in location is because this one's in the shade, so the key constraint on growth is how much light they get. Whereas that one's more or less in the sun, and the key constraint on its growth is the heat and how much water it gets. So this one's growing at the front because it's closest to the sun. Those are growing at the back because it's where all the water condenses. Yeah, so it's been about a year. I'm fairly pleased with these. I did notice that the snails in the new terrarium seem to have survived. Of course, that's open to the air. But I think that's the gist of things for today. If I think of anything else, I'll tack it on to the end, but looks like 7 minutes of me rambling here, so I think that's more than enough.